All right, we are live. Welcome to another episode of the 10 Horse Money YouTube channel, Tuesday Night Live. And we have Gayle Julian on the other end of the camera. It is good to see you, man. It's good to see you.
It's good seeing you guys. It's always a pleasure to get an opportunity to see you and do this. So thank you for the invitation.
Well,
Yeah.
we were talking last week before that we're going to try to make another trip down.
Good. You're always welcome. You know, you got to play. So anytime.
And I just want to go back down and spend the day with you guys and spend the day in the boat with our old buddy Dell. And
yeah,
I mean, it's just
well, Dell's coming this way. Is he
coming?
Yeah, Dell sent me a text today. He said, get a hold of JB, call me this week and figure out when I can come up your way and do some frog fishing. Because
there you go.
This area of the country, hearing about another, it's still a little bit off, but it's getting really close. Here in a couple of weeks, that frog fishing is going to be really good.
I did you see the picture I posted yesterday?
Yes,
with Kyle.
Yes.
So that was this time in 19, but it was starting to cool off. The water was down, and it was right. It was everything but right. I mean, it was perfect. And 2 weeks in a row, back-to-back wins. He had back-to-back wins. I was with him one weekend. I missed the first weekend, but we had some. I mean, for the lake that we fished, 14 pounds,
right,
and 2 over 18 inches, and 3 under 14. That's a pretty bag. Pretty healthy bag.
Good. It is.
And that wasn't. We didn't have a 6-pounder, and they had 1 over 6 the weekend before. So that was 5 really solid.
Yeah.
Cedar Lake bass.
Yeah.
So but we're in the right time of the year. I just don't think the lake is low enough yet, and the
water temp's still a little bit high. It's like it's been getting up. I was out yesterday. I went to Kincaid, which is another local lake, and it was 70 high 77s in the morning, 77.8, and then by afternoon it got up to like 82. So we need that.
That's what it is here right now on Bull Shoals too.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, we need that water to be like 72-ish.
Well, it was 90. I saw 91 in the car today.
Yeah, it was hot.
So that doesn't
return.
That doesn't help. So
no, I think we got another week of this maybe, and I think this is going to be the last hurrah.
I looked at the extended forecast. So I got a big bow hunting trip coming up, and I guess it was the 10-day forecast. The last 2 days of the 10-day forecast. It showed the highs that were like in the mid 70s and the lows were back in the 40s.
Okay.
So it's coming.
Yeah.
I'm praying real hard that it's coming.
Yeah. We need more of that.
Yes.
Oh, you know what? Before I forget, I'd forgotten and I just remember this. I found I heard a new excuse today for whenever you go fishing and you don't catch any fish. We need another one. We've already got 100 of them. So I was talking to this guy today. I eat at this gas station every day, and the manager, we were talking, and we got to talking about the weather, and he started talking about, climate change, and it went down a little rabbit hole for a little bit, but then I spun it back around. And I said, do you remember that time when they called off school for an earthquake prediction? I think it was in the late 80s. There was a SEMO professor, a professor at Southeast Missouri State University that studied that stuff or something. But anyway, all the local schools, I don't know if it was, like tri-state area, but I do know the local schools, they shut them down for that day.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. Okay. So he was telling me that story, and he the way he remembered that story was because his dad and uncle were out fishing, and they said they were catching them really good. And let me back up. It wasn't that the day that people called off school, there was not an earthquake, but a couple days before that, there was like a 4 point something that had happened. So and the reason he remembers that is because that day his dad and uncle were out fishing. They'd been catching fish, and then all of a sudden they quit catching fish. And they blamed it on the earthquake that was getting ready to happen. So that's going to be my next excuse when I'm out there and I'm struggling, is there was a potential earthquake just getting ready to happen, and the fish just shut off. I was wondering
where I was a little lost.
I went one way to get there. So anyway, you guys can use that. Everybody out there in YouTube, feel free to use that.
That's a different one for sure.
That's definitely. I mean, we are in like earthquake central,
right? Yeah, you are. we're on the edge of it. So
yeah, we're about 40 minutes from New Madrid. So
yeah.
But
So I posted the question, what's your favorite jewel bait or Vertus rod? And Doug from Trieve, he says a hound dog. He's purchased a few of those.
He has purchased a few of those. What a great system he's got.
He does. I try to tell anybody that'll listen about that thing, and
it's genius.
It is. It works so good. It's safe. Every time I'm out on the water, I use the Trieve. I mean, hands down, there's no doubt about it.
I'm hoping not to have to use it though in a couple weeks. Like,
if you're throwing a frog, you probably,
because there's only going to be like
a really bad
two or three rods on my deck.
Yeah. Yeah. So mine lately and has been that Pro Shaky head. I love that. That's my go-to shaky head. I caught fish on it yesterday. I caught some pretty nice fish on it yesterday. That's a really
you won a little money on that thing.
Yeah, I have. It's been good to me. It's just it's got a good hook in it. It's a little bit longer shank hook. Gets back there towards the end of the. I was throwing a rage crawl on your bigger size, like the Magnum size that you have. I think it's I don't know if it comes. Is it a 5/16 or a 3/8? I'm not sure.
It's a 5/16 with it's got a bigger hook in it.
Okay, that's the one I was throwing yesterday. I put a full size rage crawl in there and was catching some fish. Doing that, it was working pretty good for me.
Yeah, well, that bait it holds your bait in the right angle all the time, and for somebody that isn't used to using that type of a setup for a beginner, it's a really excellent choice because you can't rig it wrong, and it keeps everything good and straight, and the hookup ratio is phenomenal. So, yeah, it's a good bait.
It is. Do you make a shaky head that has a screw lock on it?
We don't. Well, we did. The angles of things that you have to put on top of the head of a jig kind of conflict with a good hook set. And so where you put that worm down on the shank of the hook, when you set the hook goes through the worm, not down the length of it. So that's an improvement.
I agree 100%. I always preach that. And anytime I'm doing a video or I'm catching fish on shaky head, I'm a firm believer in the non-screw lock jig head. Just me personally, for multiple reasons. One is what you just said. Secondly is because the more of that screw lock you have, the less your gap is, because it's coming closer towards the point of the hook. So you've really lessened the gap of that hook. And I think it really plays a role if you're finesse fishing with light line.
Yes.
Say you're fishing 8-pound line, 10-pound line, and on a spinning rod. You're not setting the hook near as hard. You're kind of just pulling on it. If you're jacking on them, say you're fishing a 7-foot medium heavy bait caster with 15-pound test, like a Magnum shaky head, you're setting the hook really hard, and you can bend that keeper down a little bit and it'll get out of the way. You still got to hit them hard, or it's like a weed guard basically. But when you're finesse fishing and you're light line, you're pulling in them. I'm a firm believer that I've missed fish because of that screw lock keeper. So
especially on light tackle.
Mm-hmm.
And more importantly, and that's a really good point. More importantly is the fact that when you set the hook with that worm being rigged at that angle, the hook goes down the length of the worm. It doesn't go through it sideways. That's another thing. And so angles on that are extremely important. And the lighter line you use, the more important that angle becomes. And so that's why we've done it that way. It's there's a lot of shake heads out there. We build a lot of them for a lot of different people, but that angle, I don't think can be beat.
Yeah, it's a good bait. Comes through rocks really good. It's interesting. It's got like the two flat spots on the side of the head, so it's different.
Yeah. Well, that spider head design comes through cover, really, really well, particularly if you're in rocks. And most guys who fish shake heads are around rocks of some kind.
Yeah, and the video, I kind of broke down some different bait options with shaky head. When I first started fishing shaky head, it was just a worm. A lot of times it was a trick worm was real popular, or a
little 4-inch French fry.
Yeah, a French fry or a 5-inch Zoom finesse worm.
Mm-hmm.
But man, you can put anything on there. I started branching out to a baby brush hog, to a little speed crawl, versa crawl. There's a ton of options out there, even a full size brush hog or a beaver, or yesterday I was catching them on a rage crawl. It's basically anything that you Texas rig.
Yep.
For the most part, you can put on a shaky head.
Yeah, guys are using the Magnum size and fishing 10-inch worm on them, at night and of daytime too. Gives it a whole different look, and a lot of guys really swear by that.
Yeah, it encourages it to. I was thinking about this yesterday. A Texas rig, when you throw it out, it kind of lays flat on the ground or lays flat on the bottom, and you drag it. It doesn't really do a whole lot.
Right.
That shaky head, when it gets caught on something, and it kind of encourages it to kind of stand up and just basically create some space off the bottom of the lake. So maybe if the fish is sitting there, 5-6 feet away, it may be hearing it, but if it's Texas rig, it might just slide by them. But if it's a shaky head and it catches and it kind of comes up like this, it might, catch the fish's attention. It might swim over there and suck it in. So
it gets it out of the silt too.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, I think we forget about that a lot. Throwing a heavier bait. I know I'm guilty of that. Is trying to throw a heavier bait, get it down quicker, get better bottom contact, and we forget a lot of times that you get outside of that rocky area and you get into some silt. Even if you are in a rocky area, there is a layer of silt over a lot of this stuff, and I think that's why you see a Neko rig and a shaky head and a drop shot, Carolina rig, all those things that nobody. I mean, those are all finesse and using an egg beater minus the Carolina rig, but a lot of those is things that we forget that get those extra bites, especially this time of the year. If you're fishing anything off of the bank, if you don't have grass in your lake, fishing can be tough this time of the year. I mean, we just saw Lake of the Ozarks. What did it take? 40, 50,
no,
52?
I think it took 17 a day, if I remember
Did
right.
it?
Yeah, I can't remember. You talking about the Bassmaster?
At Ozarks.
The Open?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
Was it?
It was 50 something, wasn't it?
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was.
Still not great bags though for down there a day.
No, it was tough. I mean, and
you just got back from the weekend before with the BFL, right?
Yeah, it took Lawson had 19 on day one, and then on day two he had 13. So that's kind of what a lot of the guys were doing. They'd have a really good bag one day, and then it would be a little bit tougher the other day.
Right.
And that lake's full of fish, but they spread out.
Yeah, it's transitional time too. They'll be wherever they want to be up there. They don't care. It's docks everywhere and there's shad everywhere. So
yeah, it took 53-11 to win. 57 was second place. 10th place was 40.
So what was second place? You said 47?
Yeah. No,
53-11.
Yeah. The 10th place was 40. So it was a big drop off.
Pounds, yeah.
Yeah, so it was pretty tough. I mean, it can be really tough down there. Lake of the Ozarks they're in there, but man, that doesn't mean they bite. I know. I was listening to Pang Rack today or yesterday, and he was talking about he caught. I think he caught like 12-pound bag both days, but they were talking about forward facing sonar and how it's come to play no matter what time of the year. But he was just using it to find the bait balls and throwing a drop shot right through the bait balls. There was fish sitting below him. That's how you caught 5 keepers doing that. Right. So there's a lot going on in that week. Somebody was talking about frogs. That was Stephanie.
Yeah. What color frog do you use on sunny skies, overcast, or does it matter between white or black?
What's your thoughts on that?
There's 3 colors in my boat, and that's it. It's black, white, and some sort of bullfrog, bluegill, green, orange belly, something of that sort. There's one color. I'm not even going to mention the color, but there's one color that I throw that it varies between the packages that you buy. So if I tell you the color, there's only certain colors that you go. That's one that I actually go to the store. I pull them all off the peg and I turn the frogs over and I start looking at them in the package and then I throw them all back. So yeah. Beyond that,
looking for that certain
belly color, and unfortunately they're not. I guess their quality control is not, very good because there's 10 different shades of that color. And there's one particular color, and it's right here, right? It is 100% right here for me.
Maybe the shade, but not. I don't think the color. I don't think something is black or white.
Right.
There. it's not, that's not right there.
No.
Maybe white, like eggshell or matte white, or that might be right there.
Yeah. This color though, I mean, I think they're all good, but there's a handful of them out there that just, it suits my eye the best. And we all have that bait, right? I mean,
confidence is everything.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So
Stephanie, I'll tell you something that I've learned over the last 3 or 4 years. Right when it gets close to dark, if you're frog fishing, say the last 30 minutes, put on a white frog. You know, tradition will tell you black. You're fishing black baits in low light conditions, but I've caught more fish on a white frog when it's close to dark than I have on a black frog. Besides that, it's really just a little bit of experimentation. If like right now, this is kind of the frog thing starting to happen, you'll want to have several different frogs tied on if you have the combos and the outfits to have just technique specific frog rods. If not, have them out on the deck of the boat and throw one for 30 minutes, cut it off, you know, throw a black for 30 minutes. If you're not getting bit on it, cut it off, put a white on for 30 minutes. Put a brown is another color that I really like a lot. I really like that in the fall time, or something with an orange belly.
Yep. And
just kind of rotate. And typically, you know, I've seen it where you're not getting a bite, and then you cut that frog off, and within 4 casts of a different color, you get a blow up in kind of the same area. Sometimes it is just the area. Sometimes it's just about moving around and trying to figure out where the frogs are at. But you really have to have multiple colors. Me personally, I like it. If I was just going to have one frog right now to throw during the middle of the day, it'd be a black. It'd be a black or a brown. And to me, for whatever reason, in the fall time, black seems to be the color.
Black I don't know why. Black is my go-to.
Yeah, it's just
the first frog that I tie on. You know,
in the summer, white seems to be better for me. I don't know why, but it's just the way it is.
There's certain frogs that I get fewer bites on, but the bites that I get on that color are bigger bites. So there's something to color I completely agree with, but I don't get wrapped up. I get wrapped up more in shades or profiles or what the base is versus going, you know, I have that one color, but beyond that, it's
here's another thing that's real important with frog fishing is the cadence. It's no different than fishing a jerkbait or
spinnerbait
or a worm or a jig or something. Yeah. There's a cadence to it, and each day it's different. You know, if you can start out kind of popping it fat, just twitch, moving it. If you do that for a little bit and you don't get bit, twitch it, wait, twitch it, wait. A lot of times they'll want like a twitch and let it sit for 3, 4, 5 seconds. There's sometimes where they want just a little pull and they want it sitting. It's literally like jig fishing or worm fishing. You have to have a lot of confidence in it, and it has to be going on for you to fish it properly. I mean, there are a few days, if you get like an overcast day where maybe it's raining and drizzling, you're probably gonna be able to work that frog fast, and you're just gonna be able to cover water. But on a slick day where there's not a lot of wind, maybe it's a Monday, you know, after people have been hammering the lake on a Sunday, you might have to really slow down and fish it very efficiently. That's another tip that I've been working on last couple of years. We get in a hurry because you see, you're looking down the bank and you got 500 yards of grass. And you're like, how in the world am I going to find a bass on all this grass? So you're in a hurry and you go through these areas. Well, next thing you know, you went through the whole thing and you didn't get a bite. Well, you might have fished overfish. Maybe you didn't, but you have to be very patient and give that frog a chance to work. And it's hard. It's so hard to do.
I'll leave us with one more.
Okay.
So you got to cover water. And if you get and this sounds crazy as all get out because it's so simple, but you get a bite, fish that area again and again and again and again. It's just no different than fishing offshore in the summertime. They conjugate in an area. You catch one in the grass, and I promise you that you're going to catch 2, 3, 4. I mean, I've went and spent in a 100-yard stretch. I spent 5 hours fishing one day, and every pass I'd get 2 bites. And I told myself, if I make this pass, I'm going to leave and don't get a bite. I'm going to leave, and then you get a bite, or you get a blow up and catch one. And I caught, I think, 7 or 8 over 4 pounds in that area.
In one little
100-yard stretch.
Yeah.
And I did that for 3 or 4 weeks in a row, every Saturday and Sunday.
And then you can go back through and clean up with a punch rig.
Oh yeah,
Because some of those fish won't expend the energy to come up. They're not fired up enough.
Yep.
But if you drop something down through that grass on them, it's kind of like cleaning up a spot with a Carolina rig or something. Go through that punch rig and you can pick up a few more fish.
Right.
So
you got any good frog stories, Gayle?
Whenever you're talking about grass, I was wondering if it was fescue or orchard grass.
Bluegrass.
So, on our lakes, we've had some grass last few years because the water's been, 30 feet high, but it's all field grass and fescue. But so no, Dardanelle, places like that is our frog fishing, from this part of the country. We don't have a lot of it here. So like doing it, just don't have a lot of opportunity other than when the water's up, you can catch them on bull shoals, Norfolk, fish around brush and lay downs and, just whatever cover, is up the rocks. Of course, we have rocks everywhere, but they'll bite a frog here really well in that. So, but the grass, unless we have high water, we have no grass.
Right. What you guys, if I'm mistaken, correct me, but you haven't had the high water the last year or so like you have in the past.
No, it's been a pool pretty much all year. It was up a little bit early. And then it came up again, in July. Well, in August we had, what do we have here? 9 or 10, 11 inches of rain in August here, I think. Mm-hmm. And so it came up a little bit then, but no, it's been within 3 feet of pool just about all spring. And, we always complained about it being high just because you couldn't, launch easily. But now you look at it and go, where'd all these rocks come from? We're used to being up in the hardwoods by now, in the buckbrush, but there is none of that. It's just right at the water's edge. So it's a pool. We have to learn how to fish again because we've had just numerous years, large majority of the years over the last dozen have all been high water. So we have to kind of learn how to fish again here.
Well, everywhere on the chains kind of have to learn how to fish again. There's not as much current coming out of some of those lakes.
Yeah, we're at minimal flow here.
Right. So not just you at Bull are having to learn how to fish the whole way up
it's
the
up,
river.
Beaver, Table Rock, Taneycomo, Bull Shoals, Norfolk. They're all at that real interesting situation. We've got a thermocline now we haven't had in years because they pulled so much water through the summertime and through the early fall, that we didn't have a thermocline. So we have that going for us now. And so it's this fall is probably going to be a good football jig fall. It's one of the reasons we, introduced the Pee Wee HD series for that, because we felt like this is going to be a perfect opportunity to get back on a football jig bite again off those ledges and points and, drop offs and things like that we haven't had in a long time because those fish haven't been out there. So, it's kind of hard to get used to again of not fishing, flipping jig into buckbrush or laydowns. We just don't have many of them now.
Yeah, and you like that shallow water fishing too.
Yeah, I usually shut down at 8 feet and then I start fishing, so which, a lot of people say we live on Bull Shoals where everybody's fishing drop shot and all this finesse stuff. So, that's okay. Yeah, I'll still shut down 8 feet of water and start fishing from there.
That's just more water for you to fish that way.
Yeah, it is. Nobody's back there messing with them. They're my pets, and so there's nobody harassing my pets. I like that.
Right. You have them named down there already?
Well, pretty much, but I can't tell you what they are because I don't want you to go back there and catch them.
No, that's fine. I don't think Dale has anything that's that capable of fishing that shallow.
Well, he likes doing that. He just doesn't get a lot of opportunity to do it.
Well, you don't, like you said, you don't come to Bull Shoals to flip buckbrush.
Well, we have been.
Yeah.
But now the buckbrush there's a little bit of brush right at the edge of the water. If lake would come up, 3 feet, 4 feet, it'd be phenomenal because what happened, we had, lakes were all drawn down and then we got a lot of rain in August, a lot of rain. And so all of the grass and weeds and brush revegetated on the bank. And so if we get a rise in water, we'll have some phenomenal fishing.
So how long have you been fishing Bull Shoals?
Oh gosh, you're trying to get me to tell my age now. I don't know, 40 years.
Okay. So
little more.
in your opinion, how would you say it's fishing now? Like, is it in a upward trend, a downward trend, or just kind of consistent?
Yeah, Bull Shoals is in really good shape. There's a lot of fish. Those high water years, you know, does now the last 15 probably, have really been good for the spawn, for the growth rate and all that. We've got a good fishery here now. So it's fishing really well. I mean, because it's a normal water year, we have had to kind of relearn things a little bit. When I say you look around and see all these rocks and it looks very strange, it really does look strange because we didn't see them for years. And I think the fish have kind of, they've realized it too. I think there's generations of fish that have only been shallow here. They were spawned shallow, and through high water years, they stayed shallow. And I think those fish have had to kind of, you know, readjust. I'm not sure exactly where they've all gone to. Dale could probably tell you, because he catches them every time he goes out. But a lot of that is the offshore stuff, sonar type fishing and drop shotting and all that. But there's still a good jig bite. Went over the weekend. I caught probably 20 fish, and they were all less than, I don't know, 5 feet, I'd say. Doing what I do, just junk fishing, jig, spinnerbait, things like that.
Can you always catch some shallow fish on bull?
I really don't want to talk about this.
He's nervous. He just made this really awkward.
First, we asked him how long he's been fishing bull. Now we're
you guys are getting really
way too personal.
It's way too personal.
Let's talk about some offshore fishing.
Yeah, but you'll have to talk to somebody else about that. But no, I just enjoy that. It's just what I like doing. I do it on all the lakes that I go to. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't, but there's always a certain amount of fish that always live shallow. You just have to have cover and conditions that make it conducive for that to happen. And so I'll select my lake depending on the day. If it's a real bluebird day and not much wind, I'll go to North Fork because I can find more off-stained water there and do what I like to do. If it's a little bit cloudy or windy, Bull Shoals is hard to beat. You're probably going to catch more fish out deep. Those guys that are really good at the sonar type thing, you're probably going to catch more fish than the day. So it really goes down to personal preference, and that's my preference. And I like to do what I like to do. I don't get to fish every day, so when I go, I want to do what I want to do. And at the end of the day, win, lose, or draw, I've enjoyed the day because that's what I like to do. Versus me going out there and trying to force something that I don't do regularly.
Yeah.
So yeah, for me, it's just shallow water stuff. And I guess maybe it's because I'm amazed every time I get a bite in an area where there shouldn't be any fish that shallow.
I know that was always table rock for me. Like you flip up into a bush that you can see everything in, and then the line goes, ding. It's like, wait a second. No, this isn't right.
Yeah, I learned that from Mike Marfell years ago.
Yeah, Mike will find him.
Yeah, 15 years ago. I mean, he's fishing a jig 95% of the time. He'll tell you he fishes other stuff, but he doesn't. I've been in the boat with him too much. He's a jig.
Yeah, I know.
But
he's good at it.
Yeah, he is. He's really good. He's got a lot of confidence in it. But same scenario you're talking about. I remember being in water that was 15 foot of visibility, and we're fishing the boats in 15 feet, and he's pitching up in 3 and catching 3-pounders.
Yeah,
you can't see them.
Right,
they're camouflaged. But you can see every root, every knot.
You can see everything. It's like an aquarium, and you would swear. I would bet my next paycheck that there was not a fish underneath that bush, and the line starts swimming sideways, yank, and there's a 3-pounder. It's crazy. So.
Yeah, we need to start talking about drop shotting or something probably now, I think.
Here's a question from Stephanie.
Hold on, do you sell a good drop shot hook? I mean,
not a hook. We build a lot of drop shot weights.
There you go.
So
Stephanie asks, if you have if you had to have 3 baits tied on in the fall, only 3, not counting a frog, what would they be? So, Gayle, you can take that one first.
Well, obviously for me, it's going to be a jig. That's a simple answer. It gets a little more complex as far as, what type of jig, and that would depend on, the structure of fishing. So a jig, a spinner bait, a gem blade, something like that with a swim bait on it, the bladed type bait or a buzz bait, and then probably something like a square bill. Those will pretty much work all the time, shallow out to, whatever depth you want to fish those out to. Keying on the shad, of course, and just the conditions, fish the conditions, windy areas, that sort of thing. I could say fish rocks, but here, if you're fishing rocks.
Yeah. If you're not fishing rocks on Bull Shoals, not sure where you're at.
Well, the water's up.
You're lost.
So 3 baits in the fall for me are going to be a swim jig, a underspin, and a punch rig. So
that's exactly.
I know exactly.
So let me substitute maybe a little bit. An underspin for sure, just because those fish will school up in the fall. They really start schooling up in the fall. You can cover water with that. This is regardless of the kind of lake. I'm going to Kentucky Lake at a BFL Saturday down there. I will be throwing an underspin down there just because I can cover some water with that. Especially I'll be fishing out the back of the boat, especially if the guy in the front of the boat is throwing a plopper or he's throwing a square bill of some sort. That underspin is a different look. I'll just be throwing like probably a 3 to 3.5 inch swim bait on the back of that thing. A shaky head is another bait that, you already said jig. Jig's obviously a really good one to go with too, but a shaky head I think is just consistent no matter what time of year. I caught some fish yesterday on a shaky head. I feel like anytime you've got a shaky head tied on, you're gonna get some bites if you keep it in your hand long enough.
And that's a jig.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's
so yeah. I mean, that's the thing about jig fishing is that. So if I were somebody that just getting into the sport, I would definitely have on a Pee Wee football jig, 3/16 or 5/16, because they will bite that year round, shallow or deep. And in the fall, your bait fish are really small a lot of times, and so that'd be something. But so whenever you say jig, there's that covers a lot of ground. So there's you could have a whole hour-long discussion about when and where and why you would do that sort of thing. But for somebody that wants to go out and just catch a lot of fish, that Pee Wee football jig is probably second to none for that.
Okay. That brings up another question. I've heard this several times from people throughout the years as a comment on my YouTube channel. They've fished a jig before and maybe not ever caught a fish on a jig. Mm-hmm. So if someone was just wanting to get some confidence on a jig, what colors would you say, the style, and then maybe the time of the year to get some confidence? Because you got to get bites to get confidence on anything.
Yeah, you do.
And it is an art. Fishing a jig is an art. So what would you just lay some groundwork for somebody that's wanting to get into?
Okay. Well, first you need to have a rod that will work well for jig fishing. So you need one that has some sensitivity to it, whether that be a spinning rod or a bait caster. You need to use, I'm just getting started, I would probably start out with 10-pound fluorocarbon line because you'll be able to feel the bite better there. Mm-hmm. And then I would probably put on a 5/16 ounce like the Pee Wee. We also build that now in the Pee Wee HD series, which has a bigger hook, but still the smaller size. But that would be where I would start. And then I would, put a trailer on there, that have a little bit of action to it. And then just mainly concentrate on the bite. Go to those areas in the fall, really about any time, but in the fall where you've got a transition area, transition meaning that you've got a bluff that is going to turn into ledge rock and eventually chunk rock and pea gravel on our lakes. And then find that type of area where the shad are also prevalent. You know, in the fall, you're going to see them flipping, and you're going to see some fish dimpling on top of water or chasing or whatever. And then it would just be really slowing down then and just spending some time trying to detect the bite. Even a really good jig fisherman is probably, I mean, a really good jig fisherman is only going to detect maybe 75% of the bites they get. And so, I have a saying that is jerks are free. So if you feel something that feels different than you think it should, or you just get this sense that there's something going on, just jerk. You'd be surprised how many times that is a fish that just picks it up and just holding it or swimming with it very slightly or moving it off a little bit. So the number one thing is to get equipment that is sensitive to detect the bite. And then get your line like fluorocarbon. Some guys use braid with fluorocarbon leader. That's fine if you want to do that sort of thing. And then get a jig that will work with the conditions that you're in. So if you're in an area where you've just got, you know, scattered rock, not huge boulders or whatever, you need something that will come through that easily. So you don't get anything that's very heavy. And then that lighter jig will also be something that will get you more bites because they will hold on to it longer, and you can mess up more without them spitting it out. And then it's just a matter of concentrating on your line whenever you cast it out there. Pay attention where your jig lands, and then as you're working it back, make sure that it's coming straight back to you. If it's not, something has changed, right? So that jig does not swim sideways on its own unless you maybe pick up a leaf. So if it's going any direction but straight to you, you pay attention to that and set the hook. Because most bites, I find through the years, rarely does a fish really just knock slack in your line and swim off. Sometimes they will. That's a really good day. But what I notice is that generally if something knocks slack in your line and really thumps, it's probably a drum or something, you know. Most of your bites are going to be more subtle. And so you're just looking for that mushy feel, that light feel, or that little bit heavier feel than what you would expect. And then just watching your line and fish it straight back to you, make sure that it is where it should be. Most of the bites you get will be a fish that's picking it up and swimming towards you or sideways with it. They rarely ever pick it up and swim toward the bank. They're almost always going to swim toward the boat.
That was a great lesson on jig fishing.
Yeah, and that's so true. Like especially the part about the bite. When you're new to jig fishing or worm fishing, you're really focusing on that thump. You know, you always hear people that knock the fire out of the jig or the worm, and like you said,
that's a good day when that happens.
You're right.
It's rare.
It's super rare. And this goes into why you want to have a very sensitive rod. I would say, if you could only afford one good sensitive rod in your lineup, a jig rod or a dragging bait rod is the one you want to be more sensitive. And spend your money on that rod for sure.
Yes.
Because it's such a subtle bite a lot of times.
Yeah. And you can use that rod for a lot of things.
True.
You know, a good finesse jig rod, and we make 3 different styles of that, different price points, but you can use that for a lot of stuff. You know, throwing a spinner bait, throwing a whopper plopper, throwing buzz bait. I mean, just a lot of stuff besides fishing jig. You can use for Carolina fishing, Carolina rig fishing, you know, just worm fishing, jig, you know, it's got a lot of uses. So, but having a rod that is sensitive and has enough of a tip to it so that whenever you pull up on it, the tip of the rod bends a little bit before the jig moves. That's really important. And that's what we built into our rods is that. Because if you don't have that, if your rod's too stiff, whenever you lift up on that, you're actually going to move your jig as soon as you lift up on it before the rod has time to compress, you know, or flex. And you'll pull out fish's mouth if they're biting very light. So you need to have one that when you pull up, the rod has a little bit of tendency to flex before it actually moves. Very, very important.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. A lot of times you get that you pull it and you're like, was that a bite? Well, it's too late then.
Right.
It's that
That's
happens. And
that's why
and
jerks are
sometimes
free.
yeah, right. And sometimes you do set that hook. It's like it's a gut instinct, or it's a sixth sense, or whatever it is. You don't really know why you set that hook. I remember a club tournament years ago. We were catching them flipping. I can't remember. I don't think it might have been a jig. I can't remember. It was a Texas rig or a jig or something. But the bite was so subtle. And the guy that was in the boat with me, he was asking me what kind of bite it was. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. I just know that something felt.
It's a feel, right?
Something's feeling weird, and you just set the hook. It's a sixth sense. And that just comes from fishing that kind of bait for many years.
In areas too. So short, boring story, but years ago I fished FLW on the co-angler side because they needed some co-anglers. It was on Lake of the Ozarks. And I was fishing with a guy that was used to fishing the Coosa River. And so he had heavy equipment, and he was a jig fisherman. And so I fish out of the back of the boat. We go to an area, got gar flipping everywhere, and he's throwing a pop R, and I'm just pitching jig. I see all those gar chase, follow the shad around. Anyway, long story short, I had 19.5 pounds in the boat behind him before noon, and he hasn't boated a single fish yet. Dang. And he's spun out, to say the least. And I offer to give him my jig rod. I had several of them identical already set up. I offered to give it to him, give him the jigs, give him everything that he needed. And he said, well, I don't, he of course he was reluctant to do that. And I understand that. He was a pro. I'm just a co-angler out of the back of the boat. Eventually though, he put fluorocarbon, he wasn't using fluorocarbon. He eventually put fluorocarbon on a rod. The only rod he had that would work was a crankbait rod because everything else was too stiff. He eventually ended up catching 13 pounds, but he lost 2 4-pounders at the boat because of the rod he was using was not suitable for what he was trying to do. And those fish he couldn't handle them. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, he said, well, I can't believe somebody's kicked my butt out of the back of the boat. That's never on a jig. So that's never happened to me before. And I said, well, you just need to understand one thing. If I had anything to tell you, I said, you're the pro, so I'm not trying to tell you something you don't want to know, but here's my observation. And that is that, because he said in the Coosa River, he said, those fish just slacken his line and swim off. I'm like, yeah, they don't do that here. If a fish does that here, it's probably a drum, but the bite you're going to get here is going to be more of a soft, mushy feel. So that's what you need to be watching for. And I could see him getting bites, but he never detected them. I could see his line swimming sideways a little bit, but he was waiting. He was so determined that fish was going to knock slack in his line and swim off that he didn't have a bite. Finally, I think he had 12.5, maybe 13 pounds by the end of the day. And I quit fishing at noon. I was waiting for him to catch his limit. I did have a couple small fish in there that I needed to cull. I had a couple that were close to 3 pounds I needed to get rid of. And so once he caught his limit, I started fishing in, and I caught a 4-pounder to cull one of those out. But anyway, if you're waiting for one to knock slack in your line and swim off down a bank, that will happen occasionally, but not routinely. So you got to pay attention to what's going on. I learned this from fishing with Jim and Troy Aikens, probably the 2 best finesse jig fishermen that ever lived. And that is they use the same equipment all the time, same line, same rod, same reel, because they didn't want anything to be different. Same jig, same trailer. They didn't want anything to be different because they wanted to spend 100% of their time detecting the bite. And so they never thought about, well, do I need to be throwing a crankbait? Do I need to throw a spinnerbait? Do I need to be throwing a swim bait? Do I need to be throwing a shaky? That never crossed their mind. All they were concentrating on was detecting the bite. And so if that's what you will do, and you'll spend your time learning that, you will become a much better jig fisherman. But if in the back of your mind is what JB said earlier about confidence, right? he uses that color frog because he has confidence in it. It may be in his head, but it works because he will stay with it and throw it where it needs to be thrown and work the way it needs to be worked and pay attention to what's going on, so that because he has confidence. And that's the same thing. That's the number one thing in jig fishing that everybody needs to know is that you need to kind of block out everything. When I fish the Central Pro Lambs all the time, I would tell my co-angler, look, we'll chit chat all you want to here before we take off, and we can talk a little bit if you want to run down the lake. But when we get to the spot, I said, I'm not being rude, but I don't want you talking to me. I need to pay attention to what's going on. And so I'm going to zone you completely out. I said, everything that I've got in my boat, you are welcome to. If you need a jig, a rod, a reel, snacks, whatever it is, you're welcome to everything in my boat. I just ask that you don't talk to me while I'm jig fishing.
Did you have a curtain that you put up and then put some big headphones on?
Nice. It would have been nice. But, the co-anglers are very accommodating and they understood.
Yeah.
But that's it. You need to pay attention to what's going on. And to be a good jig fisherman, that's key. You need to get the right equipment and then just put that bait to work. And then figure out where the fish are going to be and where on the type of bank you're on they're going to be. And concentrate on that bite. Pay attention to what's going on. Learn how to detect it. Pull up slowly, ever so slowly on a jig rod to feel something's different. And then if it's not the same, jerk. And you'd be absolutely shocked at how many times that's a fish.
What about working a jig? I mean, so go through that. Or let's just say you're just fishing a 45-degree bank. Maybe it's springtime or maybe the fall time or the bluffing like you're talking about, where it transitions into pea gravel. You're making your cast, letting it sink to the bottom. You're giving it slack line. You're watching it on the fall because sometimes fish do get it on the fall. And then if the fish doesn't pick it up,
right?
What are you doing there? How you starting your retrieve?
Okay. So one thing that you need to pay a lot of attention to is what's going on around you. In that, is there a lot of activity? Are the squirrels running around the bank and the birds all singing and you look out the back of, in the lake behind you and the shatter flipping, is there activity? Is everything alive or is it dead? We all had those days when you go out there and the fish are eating, and no matter what you throw, you're going to catch them. But we've also had probably more of those days. I have by far those days where you go out there and they're just really hard headed. And that has a lot to do with just what's going on. And so I'll pay attention to that. If there's a lot of activity in nature, then I'll work my jig a little faster and I'll put a little more action to it. If everything is very subdued, like if there is no activity on the bank, we have way more gray squirrels and fox squirrels here probably than we deserve. And if they're not running around, everything is pretty quiet. The fish are also going to be in a little bit of a quiet mode. And so given that, I will fish a lot slower and have a lot less action to my jig under those circumstances. And then if everything is very active, then you can work that jig a little faster and hop it a little bit more. So that's just kind of a rule of thumb for me. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I think what Gayle just said is fishing is really, really simple. We just make it really, really difficult at the end of the day. If they're biting and I like that analogy though. Like you think back and how simple is that though? At the end of the day, what you just said, the squirrels are going, you saw 3 deer as you're running down the lake and they're all prancing around the shoreline. The birds are flying, the shatter popping, there's gar up there cruising the banks. I mean, everything's active.
Yep.
Like you said, there's some of those days that you get out there and the fish aren't biting, the squirrels aren't running, the deer aren't on the bank. It's just a quiet day. Well, nature reacts, whether it's aquatic nature or land animals, they're going to react the same to their elements that they're in.
And I think I told you this. I think I told you this before, but I had the opportunity to spend every Friday and every Saturday fishing from November all the way through February, and so all I did was fish a jig, fish the same jig. Didn't vary colors much. You just got to pay attention to what was going on. And what I learned was that the action of your trailer is extremely important based on what's going on in nature. So on those days when you go out there and you'll catch, I might catch 40 or 50 fish a day, nature is very active. And other days I might go out there and only catch 20 and realize, wonder what's going on. What is the difference? Is what I realized is that action of the trailer determines a lot of your bites. So in this scenario, I had several times where, let's say I went out on Friday and they were biting very well. And then Saturday, maybe there's a little bit more boat activity and had a front move in. And probably the reason they bit good on Friday is because the front was coming in. And probably the reason they didn't bite good on Saturday was because the front we were post frontal.
Or there's a tournament going on.
Or there's a tournament going on, or you need to catch fish.
Right.
What I learned was, though, I had an area that had a lot of fish in it. And so if I wasn't getting bit, I had to figure out why I wasn't getting bit, because I knew there were fish there. And it's in the wintertime, by this time it's November, December, those fish are pretty much locked into those areas. So I knew they were there. And so I thought, well, why am I not getting bit? And I did yesterday. I didn't catch them all. I didn't really beat up on them. So what's going on? So I got to paying attention with my trailer choices. And I realized that on some of those days, everything was subdued. Like there was no sounds of anything up on the bank. Nothing was going on. And so I started using trailers that had no action to them. Well, since then we've designed a bait in conjunction with Johnny Schultz and Fish the Moment. We did our VersaCrawl. In that trailer, everything you need is there. If you don't want any action, all the appendages are connected, and so it falls without any action. If you want some action, you tear the gating apart a little bit. It gives you a little bit more. If you want a lot, you can take the gating out and you have it a lot, right? So, but that is very important. The action of your trailer is more important than the color by far.
I like the ideal of starting out with like 12-pound test or 10-pound test, because that right there is huge. And the rod, you mentioned that the finesse jig rod, which is in the Vexus lineup is like a 6'10", which is it's a multi-functional rod. Like you said earlier, you can use it for spinner baits, top waters.
It's also easy to handle too.
It's a light rod.
That's also important.
It's a light rod. It's got some tip to it, and then you got really light line, and that allows you the sensitivity on that setup versus a 7'3" with 20-pound test. It's night and day. So that's a great tip for somebody that's not got a lot of experience fishing a jig, because if you can't feel anything, you're not going to catch. You're not going to catch any fish for sure.
Right. And you'll catch more fish on 10-pound than you will on 12.
Right.
The fall speed, and let's take our finesse jig, which was designed to fall flat. That jig with 10-pound fluorocarbon with that 610 setup we're talking about, that's perfect. You put our finesse crawl or somebody else's finesse crawl behind it, shorten it up. That jig falls flat on 10-pound line. It falls correctly, falls the right speed, right rate, to get you the most amount of bites that you're going to get in that situation, right? So that would be someplace to really start. It's got a fiber weed guard. I'm not telling you just use ours. There's other good jigs on the market. We just built ours, balanced it, and did it so that it would fall and do what we wanted it to do, based on our experience of others. So I wouldn't get real carried away with having a lot of jig color choices. I usually will have, and we have a lot of different colors, but I will usually have something that is brown, something that's green pumpkin, and something that will have a mixture of black and some other colors in it. Something like Missouri Craw, peanut butter and jelly, bass whacker now is a really good color. But those green, or gourd green and orange, things that that are green, something that's brown, something that's got some black in it. Because with those three combinations, you can fish virtually every color of water that you come in contact with. And you keep it simple. So you're not always thinking in the back of your mind. It comes back to concentration level again. If I'm always thinking, well, I need to be changing, I need to be doing this, need to be doing that. Well, now I'm not paying attention to my bite anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Well, paying attention to your bite is number one. And so get rid of everything else in your mind, pay attention to that. And you kind of need to zone everything else out and just pay attention to what's going on, and you will get bit a lot more.
What about the finesse cut or a spider cut versus a full-size skirt? What are some of the scenarios you would choose one over the other?
And a lot of times I will take a finesse jig and I'll put a full skirt on it, and then I will pull it all back, and then I'll cut it off right about a quarter inch behind the hook. And so that kind of gives you more of a fluffy type look, and that will slow your fall speed down a little bit. And then it also, whenever that jig settles on the bottom, everything kind of unveils. It all just kind of opens up, and a lot of times that'll get you a bite. The finesse skirt itself is good because it is finesse. It looks like a tail of a crawdad, because it's short in the front. And so you have a really small profile. The favorite crawdad size is usually juvenile crawdads. Those that are about 3 inches long. They will leave shad to eat a 3-inch crawdad all day long if there's if they're available. And so the finesse jig with the finesse skirt really does resemble that small juvenile crawfish. Those are soft shell. Back when I was younger, a kid, we used to go lake and we'd go crawdad fishing. We go to the creek, we catch those 3-inch green crawdads, and that's what we'd use. They were the best. You could get great big crawdads, put them on, you rarely caught anything, but those 3-inch crawdads, you caught way more on them than anything else. So it's that. So the finesse jig, the finesse skirt resembles what they're eating or what their preference is if they had a choice.
Good stuff.
Yeah, I've grown to like a finesse skirt. And when I cut my skirts, I always cut them, like you said, real short on the top. And then I've started pulling, for those that make jigs, this, like one tab, and then still pull a handful of strands of skirt material out. And that skirt material is very, very thin. And when it gets tough, that's what gets bites.
And I think that's why the Pee Wee series works so well, because it's got that finesse skirt. It's a light. It's a thin, fine cut. I mean, there's half as much material in it as there is in a regular finesse jig, or less. It's both shorter and it is a thin, fine cut. It will get you bit when things are tough.
I think that came from my childhood, though, fishing a bitsy bug. There's like 5 strands of skirt material in a bitsy bug.
Well, and if you think about it, just putting a soft plastic crawl on a jig head is going to get you bites.
Oh, absolutely.
So essentially, that's what you have, but you've got a little bit of skirt over it when you really
got tentacles. You got made it look a little more lifelike.
Right. Exactly.
Add some action to it.
Yeah. Right. A couple announcements, and then we'll get into this question from Jim. He's got a good question here. First, we are doing a giveaway tonight. We're going to be giving away a $25 gift card from Baitworks. And most of you on here have been on the stream before, but I do see some new names on here. So the way we do that is sometime during the stream, we're going to make a reference to Sasquatch. So when you hear that Sasquatch reference, guess a number between 1 and 200. And Gayle has given us a number. We've got it written down right here. Whoever guesses that number is going to win the gift card. And also, I'd like to remind you guys of the Fishing for Warriors tournament that's going out of Red Oak at Lake of the Ozarks. It's October 13th and 14th.
That's the Warrior William, right?
The Warrior William, yes. Proceeds benefit Rhett's syndrome. It's a great function, guys. If you're looking for a tournament in early October, the bites should be getting pretty good down there. It's a Friday night dinner. They break out the red carpet. I have not been. I'm thinking about going. I really want to go. But from everybody that I've talked to that's experienced it, it's top-notch event. It's a lot of fun. Dion Hibden is going to be the guest speaker Friday night at the dinner. He's always fun to listen to. He's got a bunch of great stories, and he's a jovial human being for sure. And then the tournament is Saturday. So good cause, great camaraderie. You'll love it. I promise you that. So that's the announcements. So Jim has a question here. He says he's a big fan of the Spro hook. He likes the hook sizes that Jewel uses in their jigs. So many out there want the biggest round bend they make. Gayle, talk on the hook size of the bait.
Okay. Yeah, Jim, I'm with you. The Spro type bend hooks your fish better. I've given this analogy before. If somebody hung me off of a 10-story building by my belt, and the hook that they hung me by was completely round, and they were swinging me back and forth, would I be more comfortable with that, or would I be more comfortable with one that's more like a chain hook that comes down and back up? And I would be much more comfortable with that style because I know that it would hold me better, and I'm not likely to spin off of that loop.
I'm still visualizing you hanging off the side of
I know.
Sorry,
it might not be a good analogy, but it's that. So you need the hook is extremely important. That's why everything we build, we use custom hooks. We build them to our specifications because in order to have a good jig, you have to have a good hook. And that bend works really well. We use it in almost everything that we build. But that's the reason it has better holding power. And when a fish comes up on top, let's look at a 3/4 ounce football jig, right? You have a lot of weight, a lot of leverage for that fish to come up and get rid of that jig. With that hook being a Spro is flat on top and then comes around instead of being just all a big arc. That creates a spot in the back where this comes around that's a little tighter. And so whenever you hook the fish, it tends to have less ability for that to move around as that fish is, flopping around, coming up on top, doing all those sort of things. So the Spro bend, in our estimation, is a better design. Even our new Peewee HD that we just came out with, it is a sickle type design, but that is a wider version of the Spro bend. And we had that built specifically for that purpose. It's a wider gap, but it holds better. And, a lot of guys want a big, like he said, want a big hook with a big round bend. You'll just lose a lot more fish with that than you with that Spro type bend.
You catch a lot of they catch a lot of smallmouth on very, very small hooks.
Yeah.
Very, very large smallmouth on very, very small hooks.
Right.
So
yeah, bigger hooks only. There's a place for that. Like if you guys mentioned punching, right? So if you want to punch mats and you have 15 feet of line out and it's 50, 75 pound braid and you've got a 7.5 or 710 flipping stick and you want to jack his jaw and crank your reel handle twice and boat flipping, that bigger hook has a benefit there. But even in that scenario, I would take one like is in our Special Ops HD series. It is more of a Spro type bend, even though it's big and heavy, because you're a land more. That round bend with leverage, fish has an advantage every time. They have the advantage anyway.
Even in that scenario, I think a punching scenario, I've been using more of a 3/0 and a 4/0 versus a 5/0. I still think I'm a big fan of the smaller hook. It just
you get more bites too.
Yeah. I mean, we've caught really big trout on size 16 hooks, 18 hooks, 20 hooks.
Yeah.
There's world-class fish caught on a size 22, 24. I can't even tie that on a piece of line. I can't even see I can't see the fly, much less the eye.
Yeah.
Put your glasses on, you hold it way out here, and you hope that you hit something. Usually, about the time I get everything tied and I pull it, I realize I missed the the eye when I'm
It's
fly
the eye.
fishing. So,
But yeah, there's a big misnomer about it. You know, you got to have a big hook to catch fish. It's just simply not true. You know, the peewee, man, I mean, that thing has probably caught more fish for more people than anything we've produced in the 35 years we've been doing this. And we've just had it, you know, out for the last, 5 years maybe. So anyway, yeah, you can catch big fish on small hook. And you just, you know, it just depends on the conditions. You're going to need a stronger hook if you're around heavier cover, you know, to get them out of that cover. And you're going to need a little bit heavier line to do that too. So you just kind of have to adjust to what it is you're fishing around.
you said it perfect there, though. But a lot of times, though, we relate a stronger hook to a bigger hook.
Yeah.
So many times that you buy a jig, you can't buy a jig with a strong, small hook in it.
Right. So
let's go to that bigger hook.
Let's go back to our Peewee HD hook. We had that custom built. It is that wider gap, but in that design that we've got, the forging goes longer around the entire bend of the hook. You have forging probably that's twice as far around because of the design, and that forging will make it stronger without it being big. That's really important. You know, who builds your hooks, you know, the steel that they use, that's also very important. Another thing that's real important is the barb size. There's some really sharp fish hooks out there that the barb's too small on. So it's one thing, yeah, you're gonna get a hook set because the hook is sharp and fairly small diameter. But if the barb is small, you're gonna lose a lot of them. And again, the Spro type design, along with everything else that I mentioned, is going to land you more fish. You can catch a lot of fish, but landing fish, that's where the science comes in.
Yeah.
Well, and you talk about the strength of the hook. It doesn't have to be a gaff, right? It doesn't have to be something that's as big around as your pinky.
No.
Just got to be I don't care how big it is. It can be the thinnest wire that you can come up with, as long as it doesn't bend out and it's strong. When you have 25-pound fluorocarbon on it and you flip it into a bush and you jack them and you make 3 real cranks and you put them in the carpet, like that's what in a jig, that's what I want, because typically when I'm flipping a jig, I'm flipping it in the middle of something.
Right.
And when I hit them, I'm hitting them I'm not hitting them with 10-pound test and a medium heavy rod. I'm hitting them with a flipping stick and 25-pound fluorocarbon.
That's the difference in a flipping jig and a football jig.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And all of our special ops jigs have a custom hook. It's heavier, but it's a very short hook. It's got a good gap on it, and it has a Spro type flat top on it. And you can fish, if you want to fish 50-pound braid or 25-pound fluorocarbon, that's what we built it for. But it's not a big hook. That's the other thing. A big hook only means that you have an opportunity to get more weeds, you know, tangled up in it, or you set the hook, you got that fish in a lay down or a brush pile or buck brush, whatever, and you got a bigger hook. That hook is sticking out of his head too far. You're gonna, whenever you come up to a limb, you hook the hook on a limb, and then he flops and comes off. Right? We've all had that happen. Yep. So bigger is not necessarily better. You want strong, you want sharp, you want a good barb, and you want the right angle. That's why we build custom hooks, because they don't exist in stock hooks that most people use. We build custom because you have to have a good hook to build a good jig or a good product. You can't do it without it. Stock hooks are mediocre for everything, but they're not good at anything. And so we build the best so that you have what you need, you know, to land the fish.
You got to build a jig around a hook or a hook around a jig.
Well, that's the difference. And so because we do it all here, we design the hook based on what we want to build with it. We know what jigs we're going to build with it. So let's build a hook so that we can do that correctly. You know, it needs to have a small eye. It doesn't need to stick way out of the head. It needs to be able to go into a 3/16 as well as into a 5/8. Well, stock hooks cannot do that. You have to, there's a lot of thought, a lot of engineering that goes into building something correctly. We've been doing this 35 years here in America. We made about every mistake you can make, and we've learned from them. So, good hook, you build a good product.
We can attest to that. Like we've seen these jigs be made, and they're made. That
was fun.
They're made the right way. I can promise you that. And we don't want to get too deep into it, but it's not like anything that you're buying online. I can promise you that. You're not pouring these in your basement. Let's just put it.
No, we have a level of sophistication here that I don't think anybody else doing what we do has. And you guys have seen it. You probably can attest to that.
Absolutely. And it's and the most important part of the whole equation. It isn't Gayle, isn't the folks behind it, but they're building them right here in America.
Yeah.
They're not outsourcing anything.
No, and always have, and always will, as long as I'm around.
Here's a question.
It kind of ties into our 25-pound fluorocarbon.
Yeah. How do you guys feel about straight braid in water with low visibility for the sake of sensitivity? And then braid with a floral leader. I never really got onto that trend, Tim.
Of the which part?
The braid with the floral leader for just, I'm using braid for a frog, for punching, and some top water applications. And that's
you use braid in your spinning rods, but not in heavy applications.
In a spinning reel. As far as the visibility in a spinning rod, I'm using at least a 7-foot leader, an 8-foot leader, maybe even 15-foot leader, depending on the lake and stuff. And I don't think they see it. I really don't. I don't think there's anything wrong with using high visibility braid with a nice fluorocarbon leader.
I think to his original question, though, I think he was probably leaning more towards the heavy applications where are you punching with a braid to fluorocarbon leader, or are you flipping in heavy cover or cover in dirty water with braid versus fluorocarbon?
I think you get more bites with fluorocarbon regardless of what you're doing. I've always punched with braid. I would say the downside to that is it does make a little bit of noise, but there's a lot of pluses. You're not going to break your line. Most likely you can winch on them and pull them out of the grass. You don't get the line twist as much with braid. If you flip for 8 hours with fluorocarbon, there's going to be there's going to be significant line twist. If you flip for 8 hours with braid, you're not going to notice the line twist.
I've never broke fluorocarbon because of the fish's fault.
Right.
Not 20 pound. It's always been this guy's fault.
Right.
You'd be hard pressed to break 20-pound
20-pound line. Yeah. You get hung up on the bottom.
You're going to
break it.
I would imagine you build rods too, Gayle. So you'd probably break a rod before you break 20-pound fluorocarbon.
Yeah, you're going to have a lot of destruction before you break it. And like you said, if I have broke it, but it's my fault.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. It's a nick. It's not retying. It's a whole host of items.
And here's another thing. When you're fishing fluorocarbon and you've got a little bit of a bow in your line, you can still feel a tick.
Mm-hmm.
When you got braid, I don't think you can feel it. If you've got limp braid, I don't think it doesn't transmit that.
I think when you're dragging something, like if you're throwing like braid to a fluorocarbon leader on a Carolina reel, that's exactly where I was going. You'll feel every nook and every cranny of the bottom of the lake. I promise you that. You could have a pull cue on there and drag it around, and you're going to feel everything.
Right.
But for the sake of sensitivity, I don't think fishing a jig, fishing a worm, Texas rig, anything that you're flipping, pitching, I don't think you're sacrificing much sensitivity. 20-pound fluoro versus
hook set on a long cast with braid is more positive. Basically, as soon as you move, if your line's tight and you're moving the rod, you're penetrating the hook that far.
I think again, you go back to what Gayle was saying earlier. You have to have the right rod if you're going to make a long cast with braid.
You need a softer rod with braid for sure. Yeah, or you just rip the hook right out of the fish's mouth. There's no doubt about it.
You talk about putting a big hook in a fish. Now you got a big gaping hole, and you worry about. We're talking about the whole gamut here, from the rod to the line to the hook to the jig to everything. And we're it sounds really complicated tonight. We're making fishing difficult, but I think braid's a thing of the past in my boat, except for if I'm fishing heavy grass, because I do not like braid around wood. I mean, you're asking for trouble if you're fishing braid around wood.
I think he's talking about line visibility affects how many bites you get. 100%. I think if you're fishing a lake that's got 4 foot of visibility and you're just tying a jig straight to braid and dragging it on the bottom, you're going to get a lot less bites. I don't think it's as big a deal if you're flipping into heavy vegetation, or maybe even wood, something that breaks up that outline. But for your typical fishing, if it's moving really fast, you might get like a swim jig, something that people fish with braid. Typically it's moving through vegetation, so you can get away with that. But something you're dragging on the bottom, if you're going braid, you need a fluorocarbon leader 100%. That's just my opinion.
Visibility is extremely important, I think if it, of course, here, we've got Bull Shoals, Bull Shoals muddy here, as you can see, 15 feet deep. So, we do pay attention to the line, size a lot here and line type for sure. So,
I tell you what, visibility, if forward facing sonar has taught us anything, and I don't want to go down this tangent, but fish can see a lot farther than we ever thought they could see in dirty water. So if they can see your jerkbait in 3 inches of visibility, because I've seen this happen, because I've thrown a jerkbait in 3 inches of visibility and I've caught them. They can see it 4 foot from their nose. If they can feel it, they can feel that braid. That braid's got a lot more resistance in the water. It does lots of different things. They can feel it, they can see it. There's more of a presence there. So
yeah, what happened to the double barbs? That was a little trend for a little while.
It was. I think just the difficulty whenever they did that they weren't extremely sharp when they first came out either. Sharp hook is very important. The double barb would be a little bit difficult to get past under most circumstances, unless you were short lining or had heavier gear maybe. I don't know that it's apparently it didn't solve enough problems to have any longevity to it. We don't see them around anymore. I think it created more problems than it fixed, probably.
Here's a question from Tim. He says, this is directed at Gayle. If you were going to recommend just one rod to pair with your jigs out of your lineup for a guy who primarily bank fishes, what would you recommend?
If you're going to use a casting rod, I would go with our 610 finesse jig rod. Gabe, you can probably speak to the Acura series a little bit better. I use on my jig rods, I'll use the blue diamond or red diamond. But the 610 finesse jig rod, if I was going to go with a casting, and then we do actually make a finesse jig rod or a multi-purpose rod in spinning as well. So if I just had one to use, if I was a casting guy, I would be that 610 in one of those series.
Yeah, that'd be my recommendation too. Like you said, I've had the 610 Acura rod for several months now, and it took me a while to get used to it. I've always fished a jig on a minimum of a 7 foot rod. Right. Even a finesse jig, I threw like a 7'3". But once I started fishing that rod and got used to it, I love it. It's super light. So packability on the bank, it's not going to be cumbersome. It's going to be short. It's going to allow you to make some roll casts in tighter spots. Your upward cast, that you're losing 5 inches of rod. Say if you're throwing a 7'3" versus that 6'10", you're not going to get hung up in stuff as much. And
the weight, it does.
Yeah,
the 610 doesn't weigh as much.
Right.
You go the red diamond, they don't weigh anything. So the other thing that's important, and I didn't really mention earlier, is you need to be comfortable jig fishing too. So get you a lightweight reel and get you a lightweight rod, so that you're not fatigued. There's a lot to that. And so having a lightweight rod, lightweight reel, you can feel better with it because you don't have all that heavy tip to that you have to contend with, which I think is important too.
Yeah, and if anybody on here, not to cut you off, but if anybody on here is interested in checking out any of the Vertus jewel rods, I do have a code. It's THM10. It gets you 10% off your order. Just go over to the Jewel Bait Company, and like you said, when a rod is balanced well and it's kind of just sitting in your hand, your sensitivity goes up a lot. If you're fighting that rod, if you're using muscles to actually hold the rod up and stuff, it's deadening your sensitivity. But when it's just sitting there, and that's what's nice about that 6'10". And another thing is, we mentioned it earlier, it's a multi-purpose rod. So if they're not biting on a jig that day, you can throw a little popper on it. You can throw a little crankbait on it. You can throw a spinner bait, a chatterbait.
Virtually everything you've got, you can throw on that rod.
It's very multifunctional, but that'd be my recommendation. It's a fun rod too. I really enjoyed it.
And we have rods for each, whatever your budget is. Of course, everything is made. We make them 100% in America, right? And so you can't build an inexpensive rod in America. It's impossible to do. But you build one, so you build a good one, put all the best stuff in it, and it's going to cost whatever it costs because you don't have any control over that. So we have 3 different versions, based on somebody's budget. And but yeah, the 6'10", if I had one rod, somebody said, well, you can only use one rod. I could throw virtually everything I've got with that 6'10".
Yeah, and I just recently got one of the game changers with which is 7 foot medium heavy in the blue or the red diamond.
Yep.
And that's another real multifunctional rod. You can do a lot of stuff with that. I guess we were talking about our 3 fall baits. The one that I was getting ready that I was going to mention was a tube. And at Lake of the Ozarks, I fished the stupid tube on that game changer, and it works perfect for that. Jig. It covers. It's a medium heavy, so it's going to apply to just about everything you can do.
You have a little more length if you want that extra leverage,
right?
And a lot of that too depends on your height. Dale Colvin, he's
7'12".
Yeah, he's 7'12". Dale, I hope you're listening. He's probably asleep by now, but so he likes longer rods than I do. He'll use football jig rod, where I'll use a finesse jig rod. So it's just your height will determine some of these things. Rods are kind of subjective, but as a rule, the average size guy on a 6'10" rod, if you just had one, would work.
Yeah, Brad, if you he says, if you break a rod tip, what happens when you stick a new tip on a 3-inch shorter rod, say a game changer? Well, it definitely stiffens up the action. You're going to lose that flexibility in your tip.
It will adversely affect it.
Yeah, unfortunately, it might be a good river catfishing rod after that, and super sensitive catfishing rod.
You'll notice you won't be able to cast very well with it, and you'll notice that. It's going to be just a lot stiffer.
Yeah, Tim, this is a really good point, and this is something that I actually learned this from my buddy Alan, your brother. Buying quality over quantity. Your brother would always buy like a really nice tool, like a really high end. Say you can get, let's just say a cordless drill. Say you can get into that cordless drill for 70, and maybe there's some that are pretty decent for 100. Alan seemed like he would buy one for 200, and I never really understood it. I'm like, I'm just going to buy one for 70. Well, 20 years later, he's still got that $200 drill, and I went through 3 or 4, and
he's using it every day.
He's using it every day, and it's a better the times that he's using it, it's more productive and it's easier to use, and it's a better tool for the job. So I've kind of been thinking about lures and rods, just fishing stuff in general in that mindset. And rods are something, if you buy a really good rod once or twice a year, if you just got some entry level rods that are getting you by, but if you make a goal, okay, say once or twice a year, I'm going to really treat myself and I'm going to spend some good money and buy something that's very sensitive, very well balanced, light in your hand. It's going to last for a long time. Just do that for a few years, and next thing you know, you've got a really good setup. You've got a lot of your whole lineup is starting to really fill in with some really good quality products. And do the same thing with the reel. You can't go out and buy 10 Vertus rods and 10 Lew's reels all in the same month. I mean, most of us can't. They're very quality. It's very quality equipment, and there's a price on that. But if you just buy 1 or 2 a year, next thing you know, we plan on fishing until we can't fish any longer. Hopefully that's another 40 years. But if you just kind of collect a couple a year, next thing you know, you're going to really fill in your arsenal, and you're going to have nice setups.
And those rods, most rods last. I got rods that are 15, 20 years old that are still in the lineup, right? And I'm sure Gayle does too.
Right. Well, so recently we had the Oak Outdoor anglers here for a banquet. They had their last regular season tournament on Bull Shoals, and I probably had, I don't know, 60 guys here, I'm going to say, maybe more. I had a guide, well known, that was here, and he hadn't bought a rod in 30 years because he's sponsored by a company that provides them. But he bought 2, and he texted me the other day, and he said, "Who's your attorney for Jewel Bait Company?" I said, "Why do I need an attorney?" He said, "I just cast every bit of the line off of my rod, 125 yards of it, and the spoon broke at the knot." He said, "I've never been able to do that before." He said, "I've always had to work to fish because the rods were never really up to par." And now he's got good equipment, and he can't believe the difference that it's made. So there's a difference. He's never cast a spoon that far before. It literally took it right out of his spool. It broke at the spool and kept on going because he just was not used to something that would actually perform the way that it should.
That's an expensive cast.
It was expensive cast. He said, yeah, he said, "Who's your lawyer?" I said, "Why do I need one?" He said, "I just lost my spoon and 125 yards of line."
Ugh.
I said, "Oh, goodness." So anyway, but yeah, his point was, thank you. It's good to have something that I don't have to work myself to death with to make it work.
Okay, so here, this was me yesterday. I was throwing the Ranger. I just got a 7'3" Ranger, the Red Diamond, and I've been every time I go out, every once in a while, I practice casting left-handed, especially if I'm going down a bank where I'm not really having to target practice. I can flip pretty decent left-handed, but if I'm just kind of roll casting, and I've always had problems doing it. I can do it okay, but that situation, having the right tip makes a huge difference. You don't look like you're out there trying to throw a football left-handed or kick left-footed or whatever. The tip is so important on a rod. Yeah. There's no doubt about it. It just makes fishing easier. Just makes your day better.
Our work crawler rod. I mean, you can fish that all day and it doesn't wear you out.
Mm-hmm.
You throw wigglewort. I like throwing a wigglewort in fall, spring. You can fish a wigglewort or a rock crawler on that rod all day, and it does all the work for you. At the end of the day, you're not fatigued because of it. That's a big deal. So
when you're not trying to adjust your reel, just minute adjustments, because you're trying to get it's blowing 30 in your face all day, and you're trying to make that. Well, if you got the right rod and everything's set up perfect, that cast is easy.
Fishing's supposed to be fun, and so you shouldn't be out there just working yourself to death, to get the job done. So the right tools, I said this a long time ago when we were building jigs, I said, having the right tools is really important. You have the right rod, the right reel, the right line, the right jig is really important. You can build a set of kitchen cabinets with a chainsaw, but they're probably not going to be as good as if you built them with the tools that were actually designed to build kitchen cabinets with. It's the same. Spending a little bit more to get the right stuff makes your enjoyment on the water better. And we've always felt like that was our job as a manufacturer, is to let's make the experience the best that can be for the people out there, enjoying their craft, their sport, their hobby, because fishing is supposed to be fun. And if you're having to labor you've got, insufficient or poor quality stuff, and you're just having to labor to be out there, at the end of the day, are you really having that much fun? So that's it. None of us get to fish as much as we would like to. And so when we do go, I think you owe it to the consumer to build the best stuff you can so that their time on the water is enjoyable.
Yeah. That's the bummer about if you ever break a rod that you have set up for a specific technique and it does what it's supposed to, and then you have to go try to find another rod to substitute that
for that technique.
Yeah, it's just I don't know. That's happened to me over the years, and I always dread that time when it happens. It's almost always my fault, but
yeah, it's like wearing two left shoes.
It is. It takes you a while to figure out.
What's wrong with that?
Nothing, JB. I didn't mean to insinuate.
Jeez. You got a good deal. You got a good deal on those pair of shoes.
I did. I got them half price.
Yeah, you did. Aaron's got a question. He said he's been using the worm jig and finesse jig rod in the Blue Diamond series. What's the best Carolina rig rod in that series, considering the football jig rod?
I think football, depending on your stature, if you're a great big guy like Dell, you might want something a little bit longer than that. But that's what I use for Carolina rig is football jig rod. It just seems to work really well for that. And if you think about it, you're doing exactly the same thing with a football jig as you are Carolina rig, generally speaking. So yeah, that'd be my recommendation.
Yeah, I typically I'm like 6'1", 6'2", so I favor like a 7'6" rod for my Carolina rigs, but I have thrown them on a 7'3", and it works just as fine. You're right. It really only difference is the cast. You got that Carolina rig is a weird weight distribution on behind you,
and then the weight of that extra length of the rod once you're made your cast. So the lighter that is, less tip you have, your fatigue would be less if you can get by with it if it works for you.
Yeah.
Oh, is all of Dell's stuff super custom then, since he's like 7'12"?
No, he uses right off the rod rack stuff, but he just, it's generally longer rods than what I would use myself.
Right. Well, it's funny because we're both right at that. We're above 6 feet. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
Depends on what boots we have on that day, and how deep it's going to get. But we jumped in the boat with Dell, and it's like he's looking over our heads, not over our shoulders. He's looking over your heads. And he's like, they're right there on the graph. Can't you see them, boys? Catch them.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that Brad was talking about. The amazing customer service. I like the idea that you guys are just down in Arkansas. So anybody most of the people in this area or that are on this stream or from this mainstream fishing, obviously not. What's up, Jermaine? But the shipping's really fast. It's just right down the street, so to speak, and everything's made right here in America. We got to go down to the plant and walk through it. It's pretty amazing. That's the first time I'd ever been through a rod factory, and it literally is made from scratch. You've got a guy down there with a tape measure, and he's measuring the different fabrics or the different graphites and stacking them up individually based on what kind of rod it is, the action of the rod, the power of the rod, and it's wrapped around a mandrel and it's put in an oven and baked, and it comes out, and they do the whole thing down there. It's pretty cool. If you guys on here ever get a chance to go just tour a rod factory, it's pretty cool because we see them on the shelf. We see them. We go to the store. We go to Bait Works, and we look at the rods, and we don't really know how did that get there. But it's pretty cool to see that process.
Well, you realize that's where once you see that, where your money goes.
Mm-hmm.
Most rods that are quote made in America these days are imported blanks that they just put guides on, and so we can never compete with the Chinese or the Korean market because of labor rates. So it's, you essentially get what you pay for.
Mm-hmm.
And, the guys at the rod factory have got nearly 40 years experience of building rods. And they wrap every one of them individually by hand by a trained craftsman. That in itself in today's world is worth a lot. So whenever you go tour, like you tour here at what we manufacture, you tour at the rod factory, you see where your money goes and why it's done the way that it is. There's a reason for everything. As a small manufacturer, you know, they've been able to be in the rod business, which for 40 years, and that's unheard of in America. We've been 35 years manufacturing fishing tackle, you know, jigs and spinner baits and buzz baits and spoons and all that kind of stuff, soft plastics for 35 years. That's unheard of. You know, everybody went to the cheap labor. And so we've lost a lot of our manufacturing ability in America as a result of that. And so, I don't know, for us, we just continue to fight what I consider to fight the good fight. And we build it here. We take pride in what we do. The guys at Rod Factory same. They take pride in what they do. They test every single rod before it leaves. It's the details. And, you know, you have to support American jobs if you want to have jobs to, you know, in America, right? So, you know, our margins are slim, whereas the stuff coming out of, you know, coming in here on a container out of some foreign country, the amount that they're selling it for is a lot of times the same we're selling ours for. But if I let you know what that landed cost of that rod was here, you'd be super upset that they're charging as much as they are for that. Mm-hmm. So you know where it's going here. You know, so we can't build cheaps, we build quality, and we stand behind it. We always will. I have guys still will call me and say, "Hey, I've got a jig," and they'll send me a picture of it. And said the skirt fell apart. I look at this. We haven't made that skirt in 15 years, and with that particular band, you know, that's on there. You know, we have all hole-in-one stuff now. It used to be just before we developed the hole-in-one series, it was just a banded skirt. Well, these are probably closer to 20 years old, and but we'll send them skirts because we still stand behind them. Your skirt band fell apart after 20 years. What color are they? We'll send you some more. You know, just stand behind it. Take care of your customer.
You should at least get 25 years out of a jig skirt.
I mean,
Gayle, come on.
And the new ones you will, right?
Yeah, right.
Because they're silicone, the silicone inner core and silicone band. You will get 20 years out of those, or 25.
Right.
But the old ones had live rubber band, and live rubber would degrade under any circumstances, right? So, but we still replace them. So.
If I hold on, if I kept a jig for
you haven't been fishing that jig very long.
If I kept a jig for a year, if I kept a jig for 2 trips, I'm doing good.
Right.
Exactly.
Some guys may hold on to them longer than that, you know. So
exactly.
Yeah, just stand
Gabe, you can probably speak to this one. Both of you can speak to this one. The biggest difference between the Blue Diamond and the Cura series.
Yeah, Gabe, you can talk to that. You've got them both.
Well, so the biggest difference I noticed in the Acura series, I got my first Vertus rod probably, I think it was about 2 years ago. I got a red diamond, and it was a 7'2" swim jig rod. So I had a feel for that rod, and the Acura line just came out not too terribly long ago. So I got several of those. The first thing I noticed was the action on the Acura is a little bit softer, which I liked in a lot of situations. So for a chatterbait or even a swim jig or any kind of top water scenario, I like a little bit softer rod. That was the biggest difference that I noticed right off the bat, other than the aesthetics. The paint job, I like, you know, paint job's not that big a deal to me. I'm more about what's the rod do, how does it feel? But it's a good looking rod. Pretty good looking rod. And some of the proceeds, a portion of the proceeds on the Acura series do go back to the Autism Foundation, which is cool. So you're buying an American made product and you're giving back to a worthy cause. But the main thing that I noticed was a little bit softer action. And I talked to Jordan about that when I first got those. You know, we were kind of was just bouncing feedback off of him, and he said that's got to do with the different graphites that they use in the Acura series versus the red diamond and the blue diamond. So it's a little less crisp, but it's really good for reaction type baits. As far as sensitivity, The sensitivity is really nice on the Akura. It's a lower price point, but you're not losing that much sensitivity. The red diamond obviously is going to be a little more sensitive, and the blue diamond just slightly less. But the Akura rod, the Akura series, is still very sensitive. So you're not buying, you're still getting a very sensitive rod. It's just a little bit less sensitive than, say, the blue and the red diamond. But the main thing,
heavier too. It'll weigh a little bit more.
Right. It's going to be a little bit. Just a little bit. So there's just subtle differences. But I would say the biggest thing I noticed was it was just a little bit softer action. So, but
the blue diamond has cork, and the Akura is going to have the EVA.
That's right. That's right. And then the red diamond is offered in cork or wind grip.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which I'm going to get. I think the next rod that I get in the red diamond is going to be a cork. I want to try some cork. I've got a couple of the wind grip, which I really like. They're nice for, when it's wet outside, you got moist conditions. Yeah. I feel like that rod's going to stay in my hand better. But I think, I don't know, we've talked about this, about the cork versus the wind grip versus the foam and the sensitivity. And
yeah, well,
it's got an exposed blank.
Gayle has the best description on this, and I'm gonna let Gayle tell that one.
Well, I don't know. The difference, though, a lot of when the wind grip first came out, I wasn't a fan. But the reason I wasn't is because of the way they were built and the spacers that went in them and so forth. You lost the sensitivity through the wind grip. On ours, the blank is exposed, and so you do maintain that. So I'm a cork guy when it comes to jig rods, just because of what I just said. I always felt like they had more sensitivity to them, but I'm slowly converting a little bit to the wind grip because of I don't have to hold on to it as much. And you're right, like you catch a fish, you got a little slime on your hands. I've thrown rods in the water before that were corked because it just went out of my hand. The wind grip does tend to grip more, and you don't have to grip it as hard or as tightly to get the same, to have control of your rod. So I think that, there's a trade-off a little bit there maybe, but I don't think sensitivity really is going to be one of them. I think it becomes preference more than anything else. I think. I don't know, JB, if I said what you want me to say, not on the story of that, but I'm slowly converting all of the stuff I've got, like the wiggle work rod, the work crawler rod, our jolt rod, all that for me is all in wind grip because I don't want to have to hold on to anything tightly whenever I make a repetitive cast and doing a lot of cranking. I want to relax and take it easy, and that wind grip lets me do that.
And in the winter, a lot of us fish in the winter. You got gloves on. Cork can get a little slick in gloves. That wind grip is going to grab a hold of the gloves a little bit.
Yeah. Well, in the winter, your hand, even if you don't like, I don't wear a lot of gloves in the winter. Not that I'm like, I just don't like to feel gloves.
Mm-hmm. I don't either,
but your hands get dry,
right?
And hands get dry and your hands get stiff, and all of a sudden,
and your reaction is slower. Your reaction time. Maybe in the summer you might catch that rod before it goes in the lake. But it's not going to happen in the wintertime.
Right.
Now we can't answer this one, but you can. What's the best selling rod in your lineup?
Oh goodness. I don't have the spreadsheet in front of me, and it changes. It kind of has been moving around a little bit as we get our rods out into more areas where different varieties of, conditions dictate what people buy. But our work crawler rod is very popular. The Game Changer and the Ranger are probably right up there, pretty equal with each other, surprisingly. The swim jig rod, I know guys, and I don't think he'll mind me saying, Keith Shears own Warrior spinner baits. Keith owns a bunch of our swim jig rods, all in the red diamond, all in the wind grip. That rod is very versatile and is gaining a lot of traction too. So it's hard to say just one. And like I said, it is kind of changing some because our rods are getting out there a lot more places and a lot more technique specific things are being done. Most all of our rods are really technique specific, just so that you have an idea of what you could be, kind of gives you a starting point for what you need to use.
Gives you a couple direction, or it gives you a direction to go in, and then you can figure out once you get that rod in your hand what you want to use it for.
Right, exactly. So, but those are the biggest. Finesse jig rod is still a really good selling rod, but I think, and our stick bait rod, our jerk bait rod was the highest rated rod on wired to fish for jerk bait fishing too, and so we've sold a lot of those. It just kind of, like I said, it's always evolving, so those numbers change.
How's the wearability of that wind grip?
It's I don't know how long they'll last, but mine has no wear whatsoever on them at this point.
Yeah. There's something I wanted to ask you about. Somebody made a reference to Vexus boats. They want to hear some talk about Vexus boats because you're right down there.
Yeah,
the heart of things. And I thought it was cool when we JB and I came down and we looked at your boat and you told us when you talked a little bit about the company of Vexus, and when you found out that they were going into production and making a boat, you said, sign me up. And so I couldn't remember what number in the assembly line of the boat that you had.
Mine was a third customer boat.
Yeah.
So yeah, whenever I've known, Keith and Randy, that were formerly at Ranger. I've known them for a very, very long time. I've known Keith since he was a teenager. Whenever they left Ranger and they decided they were going to get in the boat business, I was invited to their unveiling. And so went to that, seen what they were going to build. They didn't have any pictures of what they were going to build. They just said, we're going to build a boat. And they said, we're going to start off with aluminum and then we're going to build a fiberglass. That's all right. So whenever I left the unveiling, I text Keith. I said, I got a black truck. So I said, I like black, silver, red. I like to have a 20-footer, 250 dual console, tandem axle trailer, brakes on all four corners. Consider this an order. And he called me. He said, are you sure you want to do that? I said, yeah, why wouldn't I? He said, well, you don't even know what we're building yet. And I said, well, I've known you guys for a very long time, and I know that you are excellent craftsmen, and I know you guys know how to build things. And I said, what you're doing is worthy of support. I said, not every, in the fishing and boating world, everything is a cottage industry. A lot of the stuff started in somebody's garage somewhere. And we need more of that kind of thing. Now, obviously, they weren't starting in the garage, but Forrest Wood did whenever he started. And so that legacy, I felt like, was worthy to support, and that legacy needs to continue. And so the guys that know how to build things, I think, need to be given an opportunity, and they need to be given support to build things in America. And that's what they were going to do. I didn't know what they were going to build exactly, but I was confident that they knew how to do it. And I had ran Rangers for years. I ran other brands too. They all make a good boat. So whenever they were going to do that, I said, well, that's kind of what I want to do. And so there were, I think Charlie Hoover got boat number 1. Boat number 2 was a friend of Forrest's down in North Carolina. I believe mine was boat number 3 that was a customer. And I think mine was actually the first, like, quote, customer boat that wasn't, like, intimately a part of, that family, the Ranger family at the time. So I've still got it. Forrest right behind me, you probably can't see, but I've got a picture of Forrest where he signed the rod locker, center rod locker lid. And I've got the rod locker lid here with his signature on it. I took it off and put it here. I said, Keith, build me another one for my boat. This one's going on the wall. And so it's here. But they build boats differently. Everything is vacuum formed instead of chop gunned. Their boats are very accurate weight wise. An average 20-foot bass boat could vary as much as 300 to 500 pounds, depending upon who's running the chopping gun. Whenever they're laying the fiberglass up, their boats will vary in weight by, I don't know, at the time they told me it was going to vary in weight about what a Gatorade bottle full of Gatorade weighed.
Oh, wow.
That's 20 ounces, by the way, for those that are.
Okay, 20 ounces. So it's less than 2 pounds. So, there's a level of repeatability and accuracy and quality there that wasn't offered previous.
I like the story, and it's story time because I like reminiscing from the stories that you've told us. When you picked up the boat, where Forrest was at, and just shows you what kind of man Forrest was.
Yeah. Keith called him. He said, "Hey, Gayle's here to pick up his boat. He wants you to sign the center rod locker lid." He said, "Well, give me a minute." He said, "I'm on my tractor. I'm in the hay field." He was out cutting hay. And he said, "I'll be there in a little bit." And about 30, 45 minutes later, he pulls up. And but that's what he was doing. He was out cutting hay and said, "Hey, I'll be there a little bit. Hang on." And so he showed up, walked up in the boat, and showed me all around and signed it. And it's just one of those moments. And I didn't know at the time, Forrest wouldn't be with us a couple of years later. So it was one of those really magical moments that at the time you think it's really cool, but when you reflect back on it, you go, "Wow, this will never come around again. This time will never happen again." And I was fortunate enough to be there to see it and be a part of it, shake his hand, be in the boat with him, watch me sign my rod locker lid. All of the guys who worked on my boat, they all signed the lid. So I've got all their names, on that. It's just, I don't know. I guess I'm a little, I don't know. I like to reminisce, I guess, maybe a little bit. I'm a little bit that way. I like where people who have the ability to do things do that and can make it work and be successful at it. It's what built this company here. It's what built their company, but it's what built this country. And we don't need to forget that. There's just a lot of important things that we do in America that were never done anywhere else in the world. And we're still the finest nation on the planet. And we need to remember that. We need to take pride in that.
100%.
Amen.
Well said. I was amazed when we made our trip down there at that the area of Arkansas that you're in is just kind of a mecca of fishing industry, especially boat manufacturing. I mean, the Jewel Bay Company plant or warehouse or shop is just right down the street from what did we drive past? Was it Bass Cat or
Triton?
Triton. Both. So Triton. If I were any kind of a golfer, I could take a golf ball from my front yard out here, front lawn, and I could hit a golf ball and hit Triton boats, and I could turn and hit a golf ball to Bass Cat boats. I mean, we're literally right here in the middle of them. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot goes on here. If you look back at all the brands, we had Champion, we had Legend, we had Bass Cat, Ranger. All those got their start here. So you take a 100-mile radius of right here, and there's not very many brands that aren't made in that 100-mile radius.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's just driving around. It felt like I was in the middle of like a piece of history or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. I mean, we've seen the area. I mean, it's all mountains and it's kind of hard living back in the day. So people that lived here, they had to learn how to do things and be very self-sufficient. And, they say, necessity is the mother of invention. Well, there's a lot of truth in that. Like if you have to do something, you're going to find a way to do that and do it well. And so this area has a lot of craftsmanship. That's how a rod company has stayed in business for 40 years building rods here. It's because of the craftsmanship. That's not very common anymore. What we do in the tackle world, building tackle, the way we do it, we're a dinosaur. Everybody else has already went overseas or found some other way to do it. There's very few actual American fishing tackle companies anymore.
And I hope that the next statement that I make is going to be true, but I hope they're going to be crying coming back. Because that's what this country needs at the end of the day. We need more jobs here, more manufacturing here.
Yeah, we do. We just need
stop sitting away.
Yeah, we need people to step up again. Everything was really good for a while, and then COVID hit, and everything kind of got lax again. We need people to step up and kind of get their mind back in the game and really put their effort into, building things again, and just, jobs in general, and all of that have suffered since COVID. And people need to again have optimism and hope. And I think that's what's, maybe lacking, today, is a little bit of that, and that'll return. But there's a lot of satisfaction in doing a job well. At the end of the day, you can know that you've done something well. And we just that's where we need to be as a nation.
I agree.
I got a serious question here. So not too long ago, I got my ancestry DNA test back.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just a normal white guy, nothing fancy, just like Wales, Britain, all the things you would expect. There's nothing jumped out, nothing exciting. I was kind of disappointed. But we're talking about Dale earlier in his height. Do you think that if Dale was to do a DNA test, that there would be some Sasquatch DNA somewhere down the line? I'm thinking the average Sasquatch is at least 7 foot or so. I'd like to see. I'd like to see it happen, just to know.
That is a very interesting.
Can you come get him?
I'm throwing Dell under the bus a little bit, and having
has to be a really tall bus.
That's pretty good. There, I wouldn't have thought of doing that, but it's very possible.
Yeah,
I have actually seen him out in the woods, getting brush piles and stuff around, and when I seen him, I thought there may be something to that.
Yeah, and the first time I went out in the boat with him, he knew where all the caves were, like all these.
Yeah, I know.
Places
That's kind of odd, isn't it?
Yeah, places where a Sasquatch would maybe hide. Right. He just happened to know. So
yeah, and fish around them too. That was interesting. That's where he would always end up. Whenever I met you all out of the water that day that you went with Dell, we were then a quarter of a mile of a half dozen caves there. So I do find that interesting. Now that you mentioned it, I think there may be something to that.
Well, maybe if you didn't show up that day, maybe he had plans for us.
Well, I'm glad I was there.
That's all I
can say.
I don't think it was coincidence that he just happens to know where all those caves are at.
No, it's not. There's something deeper there for sure.
We got a winner.
Stephanie's back on.
Stephanie's making a comeback. Stephanie went through a drought. She was hot there for a while, and then she kind of went through a drought, but she is back.
Man, she nailed it, didn't she?
She did pretty quick too. Pretty quick.
Wow.
Which is nice because I get a little cross-eyed as it gets about 5, 6, 7 minutes into it. So.
Yeah.
So.
Wow, that's impressive.
Well, we've been on here for a while. I'm going to ask you like one more question here, and we'll wrap this up. We can talk about this however long. Forward-facing sonar has been huge. It's funny. I started calling
hotly
it
contested these days.
Yeah, I started calling it. I was going to do a parody video, and I may still do it, but I was going to do something about.
Don't give all your secrets away if you're going to do something here.
Okay, you're right. I'll hold on to that for a minute.
It might be the next viral video, and
you never know. Yeah, I'm big at doing those little catchy, challenge videos. You know me. Anything to get clicks. So forward-facing sonar and bait design. How has that changed the industry so far? And do you see the industry continuing to change as forward-facing sonar just becomes increasingly more popular with most people? How's that affected the industry in your opinion?
I think it has, I think it probably at some point will create a category. The bladed jig thing years ago. When they first came out with it, we actually made the original chatterbait head here for chatterbait at the time. Interesting.
Oh, really?
A little interesting side note.
Huh.
They since took it, I think, to China, but nevertheless, at the time we made the original one. And, people talked about, and you didn't hear anything out of it. This was back in the, 90s. And then, it started to gain some traction. And then there was a whole category for bladed jigs, right? It created a category. I think that forward-facing sonar will also create a category. There's a lot of things that already exist, obviously, swim baits and drop shots and things like that. that already exist for that. We waited to release what we now call the live spin that Lindell came out with. We waited to release that until, we didn't know forward-facing sonar was going to be as big as it was. We just didn't know how, with just regular 3D imaging, how somebody would be able to perfect the craft like Lindell did on the drop bait, like the live spin, right? So forward-facing sonar opened it up where now when guys seen it, they said, well, I know what to do with that, right? So it became very apparent. So what we're going to see is the things that may have been done in the past, because there's really nothing new under the sun. Everything just kind of gets recycled around. Maybe it gets a little different spin on it, or it gets, maybe a little better technology or something. But in general, everything is just kind of goes around in circles. So I think you're going to see some things maybe that were popular in the past that may make a return. And then there's going to be, things made specifically for that purpose. So yeah, I think it's probably going to create a category of products. But what's interesting about forward-facing sonar is that there's a lot of things you've already got in your tackle box that will work. It just depends on the given day. So, visibility is one of the things I think is really important in that. We're working on some things that, whether you're using traditional sonar or forward-facing, that will show up better. We actually have some technology that we've been able to develop, and we'll be releasing those things later, that it really glows in comparison to other products. And so I think that's important. That side of it is really important, because you really need to be able to see your bait well. And some things don't show up as well because of their design. And design is really important in the forward-facing stuff. And then also when you've got a bait directly underneath your boat, like a drop shot. So design is going to be important in that. So I think you're going to see some things a little bit revolutionary on the design aspect, so that you can see them better. And that may be more important than the particular bait itself per se, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Menendez. We had Menendez on here probably, I think it was like 3 weeks ago, and we were talking about this whole scenario of forward-facing sonar and the fishing industry, and how he was a little concerned about the folks that are just not getting into fishing. Say the high school tournament fishermen and on into college. A lot of them, I'm not saying all, there's no absolutes, but a lot of them are leaning on forward-facing sonar as their go-to technique right off the bat. They're literally going out regardless of the season and just start looking around and chasing fish around. It doesn't matter if it's spring, summer, winter, fall, whatever. So he was a little bit concerned about the market catering towards that type of angler. And as the next generation comes up behind them, is this technology going to keep improving? And when they have children, are they going to teach their children to just start with forward-facing sonar? And a big portion of the market will be geared towards just forward-facing sonar baits. And I hadn't really thought about that. I was like, that's something to kind of ponder.
Totally possible. And technology is going to improve. So I had a bag phone back in the 90s. And now I have an iPhone or smartphone, right? My bag phone worked fine, but my smartphone, I can do a live stream with you. I couldn't do that with my bag phone, right?
Right.
That technology is already way ahead of what we have available now. So it's already there. It's already been developed and has been for a while. So it just hasn't been released yet. So yeah, I don't know where all that is going, but yeah, I think that, and I think that's where the controversy is. You've got young guys just starting, and they're only adopting and adapting to the technology that's available, which would be a natural thing to do, right? Whereas older guys like me, we didn't have that technology. We had a flasher when we started, which was pretty high tech in the day. And so it's just different. We had to go find the fish. We had to learn patterns of the shad and patterns of the fish and what structure they would be on and times a year. And there's a lot of things that you wouldn't have to know now if you were going to just embrace the technology only. Because now it's a lot more on seeing the fish and figuring out how to catch them. Whereas when I started, it was finding the fish and learning how to catch them. There's a difference between seeing them and finding them.
Yeah.
If you have forward-facing sonar, you're going to see them. I'm amazed by what I see. I generally, since I shut down 8 feet of water and I start fishing, I'll look around with my live scope a little bit and then I'll turn it off. Turn all my electronics off when I get shallow. But I think it is going to change. It's going to change everything. Technology is going to change everything. What we do about it, as consumers and anglers and all that'd be interesting to see. Manufacturers are going to, if there's a demand, manufacturers are going to step up to meet the demand, whatever that happens to be.
It's the natural progression of things, though. You talked about you started with a flasher, right?
Mm-hmm.
What did you see with the flasher?
I've seen the bottom, and then if something crossed between my transducer and the bottom, I seen a fish.
And then you had sonar with fish ID, and you couldn't get it to stop beeping for like 5 hours, and then you finally kicked it in the leg. Right. And then we got color, and then oh my God, it was the greatest thing ever.
There were paper graphs in between there too.
Oh, there were paper graphs, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had
paper graph, you were high tech.
Then you had a map that gave you a pin of exactly kind of maybe close to where you needed to be at.
Yeah.
And then we also had structure scan in there.
Yeah.
And every one of those is giant leaps in the right direction, right?
Yeah.
And every one of those is better for the industry, better for bait sales, better for boat sales, better for electronic sales. They cost more manufacturing, more something everywhere down the line. Now all of a sudden, we're on the next jump, and oh gosh, it's everybody's up in the air. Like, what is the next 4 jumps? Because I guarantee you're gonna be mad about the next 4.
Right.
I'd say mapping. I mean, I would say mapping and side scan were a bigger jump than forward-facing sonar. I mean, more useful. I mean, I've heard several people on these live streams talk about how they used to triangulate. And then as soon as somebody got good mapping, they could find those areas. And then when you got side scan, you could find those areas and you could scan those areas and find the juice. And that just took triangulation. Nobody had to triangulate anymore. What took those guys 30 years to find that sweet spot in gas, somebody found it on an afternoon after work.
Right. Right. Well, so think about that. So what happens to those guys that have spent 30 years developing their craft, and then now you've got somebody that can just turn electronics on and find everything that they've spent 30 years finding.
Yep.
So, what does it do to those guys? And then here's the big question. And so one of my best friends in the world is Scott Polly, and his wife is Sarah Parker Polly. She's the director of Missouri Department of Conservation. And so my question in our conversation sometimes, will revolve around, what about our fisheries? What kind of impact is this going to have on our fisheries? Don't know, but I think that's a fair question. And I don't want to get, we've had really good conversations here, a lot of fun. I don't want to get too far off in the weeds and that, but that would be my question is, will the fishery be able to support and sustain that? Because if you find them now, you'll find some way to catch them. I know guys that will have more in their electronics than they have in their boat for the sole purpose of going out and crappie fishing. And those guys at one point would have complained about a 39-cent jig head to put a crappie grub on.
Yeah.
Now we're spending $7,000, $8,000, $10,000 or more on electronics and don't think twice about it because they want to go out and they want to catch a limit of crappie in, first hour of the morning or afternoon, doesn't matter now, right? So, what does that do? Will our fisheries, will they be able to sustain and support the technology? That's the question that I have.
That's the $1 million question. The the question that we're not going to have an answer to until it's too late, right? If it does go in that negative path. But as you were talking, I'm thinking license sales versus forward facing sonar sales. How many more fishermen are there that don't have live scope versus that do have live scope? I guess I would venture to say that number in the state of Arkansas and the state of Missouri combined is probably a single digit percentage.
Well, you could break that down even further in how many people that have a boat.
Yeah.
And then you could go from a small aluminum boat to a bass boat, you know, a fiberglass boat. How many people have a glass boat that have forward facing sonar versus don't? I would say it's jumped significantly in the last 3 or 4 years.
But just as fisher, I was just talking fishermen in general.
Mm-hmm.
Like how many guys beat the banks? How many guys go down to the local pond and they just want to go?
Well, a lot of people that have forward facing sonar still beat the banks. I mean, you know, I'm not a person, and it goes back to what Gayle was saying, how we grew up fishing one way. That's our core. That's in our blood. I'm not ever going to give that up. I don't ever see myself being just a live scope fisherman where I'm spending 8 hours chasing fish around. I have nothing against that. I think a lot of those are the guys that are winning the tournaments now, and they're going to continue to win because they're looking for less pressured fish. But I don't have the discipline to sit out there for more than a couple hours typically. I mean, I've done it. I've had my share. I've spent my fair share of hours on it, but I still want to go back to my roots. The shallow water or just pulling up to a fish in a point draws me back, because for me, fishing is an escape. I don't want to spend the whole time just focusing so intensely on casting to a fish over and over. Sometimes I want to go and relax. I want to do something that's a little more mindless, which can be
me too.
Just fishing. So that's just me,
Me too.
It takes all kinds of folks. We're a big community. I think there's room for everybody, but I'll leave with this on my end. We all have to be good stewards of the earth, of the fisheries that we spend our time on, and take what you need. There's nothing wrong with taking fish, but don't give 25 crappie fillets away to everybody in your church twice a week. That just because you can catch them on live scope, that's what's going to deplete our fisheries. The bigger the lake, the more that it can withstand. You can really decimate a small, like Stephanie was on here. We fish Cedar, which is a 1,800 acre lake. You get a handful of people out there keeping crappie every day they go out with live scope. They can put a dent in a smaller fish. Something like Bull Shoals that's 50 something thousand acres, it's going to be a little tougher. And you got all that water depth too, and the fish move around. But bottom line is, whether you can catch them or not, just be mindful of what you're taking. Only take what you need and leave the rest for other. I think it comes down to personal responsibility, not just in fishing, but just everything in life in general. Personal responsibility is the key to everything.
It is anglers, are conservationists, and we want to have the best habitat. We want to have good water quality. We want to have good cover. We want to have good spawns. Those are all conservation issues, right? So we are all conservationists in the angling world, just what level, right? And so it goes down that we got to take care of our fisheries, whatever that means. So
yeah, 100%. Well, let's wrap this up, man. That was a lot of fun, Gayle. Thanks for spending the evening with us.
I enjoyed it. It's always good having you guys around. So and you're welcome here anytime. You know that. So
we appreciate it.
It's on our calendar. That was a great jig tutorial. If you guys coming in late, go back and check out the replay, because a lot of really good information about jig fishing. It's called Jewel Jigs for a reason. That's because the man that's on the other end of the screen here has spent some time with a jig in his hand. So that's it. Great stream. Thanks for hanging out with us. Go check out Baitworks. They carry all the Jewel products and the Virtus Jewel rods. You can use the code THN10, get you 10% off. Anything else, Gayle, before we go?
No, I just want to thank you again and thank all your listeners. And I always enjoy this. It's such a wonderful time to get to hang out with you guys and talk about stuff that we love, So it's great. Thank you again.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Let's wrap this sucker up. Shut her down, JV. All right.
Adios.
Same place,
Same
same time next week.